Hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, and thanks to be on the third or the fourth meeting on a conference. And today we're talking about Italian fantasy with three wonderful people. So, if we can begin to present yourself, maybe you can begin, Giulia, with Lumien and also your work at Lumien. Giulia, we don't hear you.
You're mute, Giulia, I think. No, you're not. Okay.
Okay.
It
worked just 10 minutes ago, but
yeah, it was working just because we went live.
Typical.
Yes. Okay. Maybe we'll let the others present themselves.
Yeah, you can begin, maybe Sephira or Lexie,
Okay.
as you want.
Go, Sephira.
Okay, well, thank you for having us, and thank you everyone for watching this talk about Italian fantasy, which is a topic whom we really do care about, not just because you're Italians, but also and especially because we are fantasy lovers. My name is Sephira Riva. I am an author, a literary critic, and also the president of the Italian Fantasy Writers Association, named Dracones, a PS. And so this is a very good opportunity for us as members of the society to speak about what we do and what it means to be fantasy writers in Italy. So I hope that we will have, and I am actually sure that we will have the chance to delve deeper into these topics. So as far as my author career goes, I wrote the book which you can already see here on the screen, which is Creature dell'Assenza, which is a, let's say, short story. And then the huge essay / manual, writer manual, Anatomia del Fantasy, which is the actually first book of this genre in Italy, which is a huge essay using feminist, intersectional feminist methods to critique fantasy literature. So that will be all from my side, at least for now, but I bet that I will be talking a lot here because I tend to oversharing on my favorite topics.
Okay, do I go next? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you, Sephira, for involving me in this beautiful meeting. So my name is Alexias Davino, but you can call me Lexie. And I'm an Italian author, teacher, and translator. So my very first work is Arete la Rinascita, which has been published by Edizioni. And it is actually urban fantasy, which is located in Napoli. So it is my city. So I wanted to create a story that could actually talk about my city and also my own identity. So it's a queer urban fantasy. And I'm also a member of Dracones. I think I've been one of the first members to actually join Dracones. So I'm very happy about it. I'm very proud about it because we really need something like that. Dracones is an opportunity for us as Italian authors to connect and also to talk about Italian fantasy in a different way in order to create a community. And yeah, I have more projects I'm working on right now, and I want to complete the Arete trilogy. I think it's my main objective right now. And yeah, thank you so much.
So you're mute, Giulia, but you can try to speak.
No,
still not.
It's not working, no.
Try to disconnect and reconnect, perhaps. Sorry.
That's live.
Sorry. Everything was working very well for minutes, entire minutes.
The joys of broadcasting.
Yes. And the second we went live, there was a problem. Sorry, Giulia?
She disappeared just right when we heard her.
Yeah.
I can just take some spots. So yeah, this is so on our side we're this is hosted by Kaya and the Confluences Festival. So Aliya from Chimera SFF is hosting this. She didn't, she's modest, but she does an incredible work promoting science fiction and fantasy and on the French speaking area. And so yeah, thank you very much for her to be helping us organizing this. She's also an Italian speaker, so she does have her claws in this particular topic, and so yeah, thank you so much. We will eventually try to notify you of every authors and books that will be mentioned. And if we don't, then we will put it in the description of the replay. So don't worry if you guys, if you can manage to take note of everything that happens. She's back, and I will try to get her on stage.
No.
Still doesn't work.
No.
Still doesn't work. Oh dear.
Damn it.
Okay. I'm afraid that's.
And if did you look at your microphone on the StreamYard? If it's good or not, I don't know how to say that.
I'm trying to. Yeah, probably, maybe, yeah. Sorry, guys. It's very weird because it was working like 2 minutes before we started. Maybe we can keep try to present
going.
Lumien. Yeah,
Yes,
or maybe give a small presentation of Lumien.
Maybe I was going to do it at the end, but we can begin with it if Giulia is not here for the moment. Can you speak maybe about?
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Thank God. Okay.
Oh dear. Okay.
I am so sorry. I don't know what happened. It worked just fine before. Sorry. I didn't touch anything, I swear. Well, let's be professional. Well, hi, everybody.
Hello.
I am Giulia from Lumien. And just to give you a quick word about us, we are a traditional publishing house. And by traditional, I mean we don't do any vanity press. Basically, we don't ask writers to pay for publishing. We, of course, invest in them. And that's a thing we like to highlight about our business. We specialize in fantasy and science fiction, all written by Italian authors. We created Lumien because we felt Italian writers of fantasy and science fiction genres were kind of undervalued by the industry and didn't have actually a place to be, a place that promoted them and that, well, basically valued them enough. So we created Lumien, and as of now we have 3 collections. Scaglie, so scales, like dragon scales in English, dedicated to fantasy. Then Zenith, dedicated to science fiction. And then, as Sephira said before, we also have the non-fiction collection of Lanterne, so lanterns, in which you can find Anatomia del Fantasy, written by her, and Gloria Bernareggi. And I don't know if you want to know anything about us, but I'm here for any questions.
Thank you all. And so glad we have all of us to do this meeting. First question that's very general, but what was your first contact with fantasy? How did you dive into it?
Who answers?
Yeah, who answers
Everyone.
first?
Who wants to begin?
Okay, yeah, I'll start then. It was when actually when I started to read, so around like 6 years old, with an Italian series of book for children, Geronimo Stilton. I have to say it because it's part of my childhood, and I think it was translated in Europe, of
Yeah.
course, but I don't
Yeah,
know
it
if
was in.
it was translated in English.
Oh, I don't know.
And it's a series of small fantasy children's book, basically fantasy because, well, not all of them are fantasy, but a lot of them have magical elements in it, and they tell the adventures of these mice, but they are really, really particular because they are set in a contemporary universe. So they're really lovable and
Because-
written by an Italian author.
Yeah. Lexie, Sephira, we want to go.
Sephira, you go next. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you. Then in my case, I think that my first exposure to fantasy was actually in the forms of fairy tales. So as a very young child, that was definitely my first read, and when my mom was actually reading to me. And being of mixed heritage, because I'm Italo-Croatian, so half Italian, half from Croatia, I also got exposed to kind of all the Slavic types of fairy tales, which are fairly different and which also come from completely different tradition, which is unfortunately unknown in Italy as well as in most of Europe, really. So I would say that was really my first attempt and my first influence. And it's something which comes up surprisingly often in what I write as an adult. So you really don't know when you end up with, depending on what you have been read to as a child.
Okay, I'll go next. So I think actually I have to thank my grandfather because he really was interested into Greek mythology, all the epic, and so he actually bought me this huge book with all the main Greek myths, and so I completely fell in love with it. So I was in love with Ariadne, with Amor and Psyche, or even the Minotaur, and so many stories that really inspired me through my own journey as a writer. And and Geronimo Stilton as well, to be honest. I adored Geronimo Stilton. I think it was Viaggio nel Tempo, because he traveled in many
Yeah,
different
and
eras.
there was also Viaggio nel Regno della Fantasia.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we travel in the fantasy world.
Yeah, and it was
Beautiful.
so great. And there were actually pages you could actually smell. So
Yeah,
they were scented. And I don't know, I was completely in love with that book. And
yeah, they were amazing.
yeah, they were amazing. So yeah, I think they were my main inspirations, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. Actually, all of you dive into it into your childhood. So very early. Um, I will continue with general question before we go into the subject really hard. Fantasy is a very large word that embraces many genera like epic fantasy, heroic fantasy, romantasy, science fantasy, dark fantasy, etc. How would you define fantasy broadly speaking? And are you promoting all genera, or do you focus on one, or do you? Sorry, I lost my words. Do you éviter let some on a comment on dit éviter?
Avoid.
Avoid. Do you avoid
Okay.
some?
Okay.
Well, if I start answering this, I might end up like tomorrow because it's one of the topics which I covered in Anatomia del Fantasy, and it took me a full chapter. So I'm afraid it's going to be taking a fairly long while to answer. So I'll just keep it brief. We consider fantasy, and I kind of include both me and my fellow writer, Gloria Bernareggi, because we tend to write as a, let's say, couple, so 4 hands, 2 brains. So we tend to consider fantasy as, of course, a non-mimetic sort of fiction, so which is not directly related to what is real, but it has some sort of link to reality and to what actually happens, both in the contemporary world, but also in our history. And in that sense, the magic element is something which is helpful to understand better our current world and imagining new possibilities. So it's something which is for us a liminal genre, so something which is dealing with borders and crossing them. And in that sense, obviously, fantasy is part of the wider room of the fantastic, together with science fiction. But the main difference between, let's say, fantasy and science fiction is in what is the impact, I think, given through reality, and in that sense, the importance which science, but really in terms of logic and understanding, comes into play in these sort of things. But really, I could go on for a very long while, so I just stop myself here.
So I'll go next. I think that actually Sephira gave the best explanation of fantasy because if I want to expand it in a sense, I would think that fantasy could be a way of talking about some things like even post-colonialism, queerness, feminism, with a different lens. So I think my idea of fantasy right now, in this very moment, is the idea of telling new stories through something fantastic, through an element of fantastic environments or even spaces or magic. But in this sense, it's a reflection of reality, but with an extra point of that magical aspect. So for me, I think it's something that has to encompass everything, especially in our own society. We need to talk a lot about some different themes. And as a writer and as a reader as well, I try to search for stories that can actually make me understand the world better. I don't know if it makes sense.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I think that it's even true for novels and stories that don't have any objective. Like they don't aim maybe to explain something like society or a theme in particular. They just want to tell you an adventure. Even those stories can tell you a lot about the world the writer lived in, or how he or she saw the world. So fantasy is a genre that since the beginning of itself just told stories even when it wasn't trying to. You know what I mean?
That's very interesting because all of your definitions are completing each other's and giving a new perspective about fantasy. And so, what's the criteria, in your opinion, that make a fantasy book a good fantasy book?
Oh, that's hard.
Oh my God.
I'll leave it to the publishing house now. Giulia, you start.
Well, it's actually a really difficult question because every book is different. Every writer writes differently. And when we are evaluating manuscripts, we usually are looking at a couple of things. First of all, the writer's style. And I don't just mean how the person uses grammar or just words, but how the person conveys what the message he wants to convey. So we are looking at that, and then we, of course, are looking at the at the story and the world that person created, because that usually is the biggest part of fantasy. So world building, the setting of the plot is really important, as well as you can see in the essay written by Sephira, the magic system is really fundamental for a fantasy book. So we are looking for stories that convey a message, or at least they are really interesting in the way they are told. And of course that they represent an interesting world, a magic system, and every characteristic of the fantasy genre itself.
Okay, I don't know. I want to go first, Sephira. I really, it's not an easy question.
It's not an easy question.
Yeah, definitely not. If I were to say what I'm looking for in a book, it will be definitely the message. So if it's something which actually leaves me hanging, and something which I can take home, and which will continue living in my mind for just a few days, maybe after I have closed the book, then it's definitely been a good read. If it's something I kind of just disappears as soon as I close the book, then it's probably not worth it. Especially because we have so few time now, so we have such a little time to read, and reading has to compete with all those different activities, be it just watching a movie or whatever, just spending time with your friends. So it has to be worth it, and for me, for it to be worth it means that it has to be leaving me with something else.
Okay, as for me, I completely agree with both Giulia and Sephira. And yeah, I think I'm looking for a message that actually resonates with my own experience in some sense, especially when I'm reading queer literature lately. I've been searching for something that could actually talk about identity, a journey to identity, something that really talks about the character's journey into their own self-discovery. So maybe I'm very focused on characters. Yeah, I'm really looking for charismatic characters that I can actually tell something to me, that I can actually relate to, and that can be my friends in some ways. I don't know. I really feel like I want to be friends with the characters. So if I can just hate them, I don't know the purpose of reading the book. I don't know. So yeah, I think that's my main point.
Thank you. So we define fantasy, and a good fantasy book. Well, that's not a limited definition. You can add other definition as a reader, as a publisher, I think. But we define something. About now Italian fantasy, because we're here for that. Do you think that Italian fantasy is different than English fantasy, French fantasy? I don't know. And if yes, how is it different?
Oh, I love this question. May I answer?
You go
Go
first.
on.
So yes, Italian fantasy is different, and its difference lies mostly in the fact that it's written in Italian. And the way you think in, the way you write in, shapes the way you kind of think. And so some part of it somehow permeates the story, and it makes it different just because of the way you're looking at the world, because of the words you're using. And so the choice of writing in a language or another really do have an impact on the story you're telling. So that's definitely one point to be taken care of. And then there is something else, which is the kind of story we're telling as Italians. Because obviously, due to our kind of history and also our geographic location in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, we have been subjected to a variety of cultures, and Italy as a country is fairly recent, all in all. And in our past has been quite turbulent in the sense that we used to be many different countries in what is currently Italy. And you can totally tell that in the way that some subgenres have emerged with respect to others. And one of them is definitely historical fantasy, which is now coming in full force in Italian fantasy literature. So that's maybe something which I can delve into deeper later on. But I would say that both the choice of story that we decided to tell as authors, as well as the way we tell them, because we're Italians, because we are using the Italian language, really makes them different with respect to not only, obviously, the Anglo-Saxon literature, but really with respect to the entire European literature. And I think that holds true for all European countries. So each own have their peculiarities, and they're definitely worth discovering. And while we might address and detect these differences more clearly when it comes to stories which come from much farther than Europe, for example, Indian fantasy or fantasy written in, I don't know, Thailand or China or Japan. So those are obvious examples. And then when you write them and you read them, you can definitely see that they are different in the way they're thought out, in the way the themes which are recurrent are kind of different with what we're expecting. But again, even in Europe, you can spot small differences. So I think that that's something which is interesting, and which is a particular, it's really a peculiarity of each and our own countries.
Okay. Giulia, you go next. Okay.
There's not much more to say. I think I can add the fact that a lot of authors actually put a lot of myths, legends, and folklore in general in their books. For example, just to name a book, an author, Enzo De Simone, with his Rione dei Raggiri, basically told a story set in Naples in the 1600s, if I remember correctly, and he used all the traditional Napolitan masks and legends and myths. So that is something that you don't find abroad. I mean, you can, of course, can find it, but not maybe with Italian myths and legends. And I find Italian authors really close to their home and their legends. Just to name another author, Sara Simoni wrote an entire saga set in the Dolomites using myths and legends of that location. So you can always find these kind of settings and themes. They're recurring in Italian fantasy literature.
Yeah, actually, I agree with both of you. And I think the kind of regional fantasy we talk about in Italy, it's very different from maybe elsewhere. I write about Naples as well in my stories, and I feel like there's a different hue to what I write from, even if I compare it to maybe, there's one of my colleagues from Edizioni, Sara Cremini, who wrote actually La Benandante, which is all based on the legends of the Val Trompia, so in the northern Italy. And it's completely different from what I used for Arete la Rinascita, for example, because I used the heritage of the Magna Graecia. I used so many different things from my own classical studies, from Roman culture, Italic culture. So I think each and every region could add something to the narrative of fantasy, of Italian fantasy in this case, which is very interesting because I think it's very special and specific for Italian writers as well. We could use dialect, we could use our own cultures, we could use our own folklore, our own spells, magic, and so on. I actually want to write about Janare, which are the Neapolitan witches.
Yeah.
So there are so many good subjects we could write about, and it's very different from region to region. That's why it's very special to me as well.
I think what you were saying, that fantasy in general actually is really interesting because it's about inspiration, and so inspiration can come all around the world. And if you're talking about a new form of the witch, you're just saying, like, sorry, I don't remember the name.
Janare, Janare. I write it down.
Janare.
Actually.
Okay. But you can take this Napolitan witch, but add also some cultural exchange from other countries or other inspirations. But if you don't know this witch, you don't know how to have this type of fantasy.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true, because it's part of
Janare.
our Janare. Yeah, it's part of our own heritage. Yeah, yeah, of course.
Actually, I grew up also with a bit of Italian fantasy, with Thea Tilton, non Gelo.
Yeah.
No,
Yes, Hilton.
uh,
Geronimo Stilton and Tel Stilton.
Yeah.
we have a Geronimo Stilton and Thea Stilton actually, but he's a personage. People. Well, I also grew up with Licia Troisi.
Yeah.
And,
Oh,
La Ragazza del Drago, La Fille Dragon en français. It's not translated in English. Well, I speak Italian and my brain just switched in Italian. Not the thing I wanted. But when we talk around the world, I mean, not in Italy, about Italian fantasy, we have these two names, Geronimo Stilton, Licia Troisi, and maybe we can think about Italo Calvino
Yeah.
with the invisible cities, but there's not such Italian authors no around the world. So can you have an explanation for that? And do you have ideas to expand Italian fantasy?
Oh, I wish I had. I think this is just my personal experience with Lumien, talking with the representatives from other publishing houses. I mean, foreigners publishing houses. So from Germany, France, and basically all around Europe. Basically, people seem always interested in the Italian fantasy landscape. So they always ask us the plots, themes of the books. They seem really, really interested as soon as they hear the numbers. And we have really actually good selling numbers for an independent publisher, especially speaking of fantasy. But I think abroad they are not so used to the selling numbers of books, of fantasy books in Italy. And basically in Italy, I think people read really, really, really few fantasy books. And the few that are known are publishing cases. So they are really famous, but they are just, as you said, a couple. You can maybe name Luca Tarenzi just to add a name to that list, but there are really few names and titles to that list. And I think it's difficult to translate Italian to I don't know, German, French and everything, just because they, as businesses, they want to invest in something that can make money. I know it's really pragmatic, but in my personal opinion and experience, it's unanswered, that question. Of course, we can add a lot of topics. For example, the fact that Italian is not an easy language to translate, maybe to some languages, and there are maybe lots of technicalities in the bureaucracy of Italy, which makes everything more complicated. And a lot of independent publishers actually don't take part of international book fairs, basically because they cost too much money. But I mean, that's another topic for another time. I will not go into that.
Actually,
Yeah.
that's another question in my questionnaire, so we can speak about it just later.
Okay, perfect. Well, that's my personal experience. I don't know if you guys have other opinions.
Well, I think it's I think I have quite the same opinion. And maybe, yeah, as a translator, I also think about the problematic of translating some ideas in Italian. Maybe for some languages, the switch to Italian and to other languages could be quite difficult. So maybe that's why some publishing houses, some foreign publishing houses, tend to not go into Italian fantasy as well as they could go to English or American, British or American fantasy and so on. I don't know. I think it's also a matter of aesthetic. I feel like there's a lot of love that has been given to Italian aesthetic, but when it comes to Italian stories, the worldwide public is a bit more uncertain. I feel like there's not that openness to Italian stories as there should be for us as well, for our own cultures and so on. So yeah, maybe there's a little bit of bias. I feel like there are many stories written in an Italian setting, but which are by foreign authors, and very few stories from Italian authors that are actually reached a foreign public, a worldwide public. So I don't know if I don't think it's because there's a lack of interest. I think people are very interested in other cultures and in Italian fantasy as well. But maybe the translation, maybe the selling, the whole part of selling books.
That's a lack of money, actually.
Yeah, I think there are so many biases and so many difficulties that come to the whole idea of translating an Italian author. So I think, there are so many elements to study in this case. But yeah, I don't know. I think the Italian aesthetic has been the most problematic, in a sense, part of the worldwide relationship with Italian fantasy, because I feel like they just some readers just want the aesthetic, but not maybe the story written by an Italian author. They just want the idea of the Italian setting or Italian magical system or Italian folklore, but not maybe the Italian voice behind it. I don't know. It's an idea.
As an Italian translating publisher, maybe we can have some insight here.
Of course.
Translations cost are the most common pretext we get from publishers in France, and
you should show.
Sorry.
You should show Akutken the cover.
Yes. So, yeah, that's so I call Pedicana now, which is what our this year's Italian translation we made in the beginning of the year, it's very, very Italian coded, and even Sardinian
coded.
And for example, we had to but it's also what we liked, and even in translating the title, because Canonau is type of wine, and but not very well known in France at all. And so, but we have the word canon, which means glass of wine, means a big glass of wine. So, and we kept the canon term within the book. So but the thing is, we can play with this because we are on different level, but we are Italian speakers within Hikaya, and we can translate with our own abilities. Many French publishers are over specialized in English literature, in fantasy and science fiction, maybe a little less in science fiction, but in fantasy definitely. And there is definitely some kind of very discomfort into going abroad and going even in the European space. So that's and I don't know if you guys had this experience with other countries. We feel like it's a very French problem, but perhaps not.
We had this experience with I don't remember correctly, but it was a publishing house who spoke Arabic. Arabic, and they actually asked us to translate our books into French or English and then send them to them. And we were like, yeah, of course, thank you for the opportunity, but it has a cost, and it's not like a few euros. So we had this difficulty, and then we've noticed this with some other countries, but like I cannot name Germany, for example. Like I cannot name a country just to make an example.
Yeah, and there's also the fact that the publishing industry can be dramatically different from one country or another, even in its production lines, kind of, so to speak. And within Europe, we kind of work the same way. But if you go into the Arab world and if you go in China and everything, it's much more, they do things differently. They have different, even regarding jurisdictions, regarding laws, regarding habits of how an author works with a publisher, how publishers work between them and with partners from different countries. So many, domestic publishers can also be afraid of having to handle this. And that was sorry, Aliya, for
no, that's okay.
This.
Thank you.
Well, then I will just add one more piece to this very complex puzzle, because one thing you said, Aliya, actually struck me, because you cited Italo Calvino as a fantasy author. And for you, this is obvious. And for me, it's obvious as well, but it's not obvious at all in Italy. So in Italy, we have a huge problem in actually recognizing our own fantasy culture. It's something which has been masked and covered and spoiled really in the next few centuries. Where it became sort of apparent that the only real literature in Italy, if you want to do literature, you don't do fantasy. You don't do anything which comes even close to fantastic. So, and this is a big stigma which we actually have to address whenever we want to write fantasy as Italian authors. And I think this is also something which comes into the big picture whenever you talk about numbers of copies being sold, etc., because it's very kind of hard to convince the Italian public, first and foremost, that we actually exist, so that Italian fantasy exists. And I know it's something kind of laughable, but it's true. And secondly, that we have a story and we actually have some interesting things to say. Whereas usually everything which comes out of Italy, and that's also about the stories which do get translated abroad, it's always some sort of realistic literature, usually set in the South, some sort of historical fiction, maybe like family dramas, those sort of things. But it's a pity that really we kind of get completely overshadowed somehow by our own past and by sometimes, as Lexie was saying before, what is expected from Italy. So the Italian aesthetic, which is unfortunately very popular, especially in the United States, somehow becomes the lens through which people look at Italy and also affect what is being published in Italy itself. So it's kind of like a vicious circle, which we have to take care of before we can actually think about expanding abroad, which is definitely something we all want to do. And it's one of the major objectives of Dracones as a cultural association. But if we talk numbers, even if we look at the production and what is being published in Italy as fantasy, we have 93% of the global production, which is all in translation from England or US, and we only have like 7% of Italian fantasy authors being published in Italy,
That
which
was
is nothing.
my following question, actually.
Well, sorry.
So you're on. You can continue, but I was just going to ask. Well, there's 7% of Italian fantasy. Why? How do you explain that lack of interest of from Italian readers? And so I wanted to add just a story. I went to Rome in March, and I went to different libraries, different bookshops, and two of them. I remember two of them that was very very cool, actually, with science fiction, fantasy, all genre. There was literature, etc. Altro Comando e Spazio 7. They have fantasy, but I also remember another bookshop that I will not say the name. And I enter in, I just look at the books, etc. And I asked for science fiction and fantasy. They gave me Dune and Fahrenheit, and so I said no, I want Italian fantasy or Italian science fiction. And so the bookseller said to me, "Oh, that doesn't exist."
Yes, that's. It makes me so angry, but I'm not surprised. But I'm not surprised because that's really the situation we are living, and it's been like this for the past 20 years, 30 years actually, more or less. Things are changing slowly but steadily, mostly thanks to small publishing companies which have never stopped working and publishing fantasy, making up that small 7% which we kind of survive from. But finally, I think this is, we have to thank other products and other medias for that. So for making fantasy mainstream. And as soon as fantasy became more popular as a genre per se, then even big publishing companies who unfortunately in the Italian market make up for, let's say, 100% of the actual space covered in libraries, etc. They actually discovered that there are also actually Italian authors writing fantasy, and so slowly we are becoming more apparent. And yes, also Italians are being published by big publishing companies. It's still something to be celebrated because we tend not to kind of get too excited on this because it happened before. So we had a history of kind of a small boom appearing of fantasy authors from Italy suddenly being published and then being a huge flop. And so afterwards we had like no publishing for 20 years. So that also happened in like our cultural history. But I think that now things are different because there's also higher quality with respect to before, especially when it comes to some subgenres such as high fantasy, grimdark, epic fantasy. They used to be very derivative. Whereas now, due to kind of a more conscious approach from Italian fantasy authors themselves, and kind of deeper understanding of both the genre, but also kind of how to write good stories, and delving deeper into our own cultural peculiarities and folklore, as we were saying before. We do see some very good stories, and I would say that in general the level is rising quite a lot, which makes it obviously easier to break this vicious circle I was talking about, and eventually hopefully turn it into a positive, virtuous circle instead.
Thank you. So I think we can stop on this question because time is running and I have so many questions. I will alternate between question about writing and question about publishing. So you can answer for both if you want, but that's it. I've seen on Lumien Instagram that you were in a manuscript pyramid. There are many manuscripts.
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we
Sorry,
do.
I had some technical issues before. Of course. Yeah, at the beginning of this year, we basically asked the writers to send us their manuscripts, and we got almost 400 manuscripts, which for an independent publisher, as we are, is quite a lot. And so we are still evaluating them. We are actually finishing, but since I'm not the person in charge of that, I will not answer this question in detail. But yeah, we are getting always getting the question, when are you going to accept more manuscript? I have my book, it's ready. When are you going to evaluate? Writers seems to be like mushrooms, we say in Italy. So they are born basically. I mean, a new writer is born every day, and that it's not a bad thing. I like the enthusiasm. It's just that really there are almost more writers than there are readers of fantasy, and this is kind of an issue because you have to actually sell the books and of course find the audience for them, so you cannot make everybody happy, but it's just an issue with this industry and the Italy in general.
Thank you. And so in the writing part, how much is it difficult to be published as an Italian author?
Okay, I'll try to answer this question. Okay, so I'm not sure. I think I've had very few experiences with publishing houses. I've also self-published during my own phase of not really believing into the publishing system, the Italian publishing system. But I don't know, I think many publishing houses right now are very open about the author's ideas. It didn't used to be like that before. It was very difficult to even tell your own idea, your own concept to a publishing house, because I think like they were not that interested into what you had to talk about, what you have to say with your writing. As for now, I feel like quality is the first thing publishing houses want. And it makes sense because we have so many new ideas, but they have to be conveyed in a good manner, in a sense. So quality is the main thing publishing houses really want from us. Then we can work with editors, we can work with the people behind the publishing houses to even organize the ideas and so on. But the quality of writing really matters right now. And I think I've seen so many good projects lately from Lumien, but even from other, from my publishing house, Edizioni, or even other publishing houses, and even in self-publishing as well, because we don't talk about the fact that self-publishing is really growing a lot right now in Italy as well. So I've seen so many good projects, so many good ideas, which actually reached a lot of people. So yeah, I think quality is now at the center of the discussion when it comes to Italian fantasy. And even when it comes to the themes we want to discuss in our own stories, it's the way we discuss them. It's not the theme in itself right now, because we have so many new voices that are actually trying to talk about, as I said before, queerness, post-colonial matters, and so on. So it's how you talk about them.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to add something or no, Sephira?
I would just say that rather than being difficult to publish, which is now, let's say, fairly easy, it's very difficult to publish well. So you might end up with a publishing house, but relatively easy with respect to before. But since this, let's say, we are currently in a big moment for fantasy in general. There are so many different publishing houses, and it's very easy to kind of end up in a bad situation, or just to accept a contract which maybe gives you like 50 copies and only in ebook. So it might be fairly pointless in that sense. So publishing per se is easy, but publishing well is very hard.
Yeah. We are always getting questions from writers who actually published before with maybe, of course, other publishing houses, and they had like the most horrible situations, such as the one Sephira described. And the landscape of the publishing houses in Italy for fantasy is really dark, because there are a lot of malpractices and a lot of contracts that don't actually tell the truth. They write they write in tiny tiny font, really bad stuff. So yeah, we with Lumien, we try to make the more transparent publishing house as possible, but of course we're talking about the industry in general.
But as a Lumien author, I can confirm that we are one of the good guys.
We're not really bad guys. English-speaking authors are usually supported by literary agents. Is it also the case in Italy or not?
Not so much, because there's only like 3 literary agents dealing with fantasy in Italy. So it's very, very difficult to actually end up in the good graces. When you do, you hope you're set for life, but it's not even the case. So again, it's all an open game. I think that mostly in Italy, it still works as word of mouth and by, let's say, freely submitting by yourself the manuscript to the publishing house. And really, since there is not much money for it either way, it's sometimes just not worth it to have an author and to split the royalties, which are already very few.
I think maybe the only case in which is like a great investment if you get published by a publishing giant, such as Mondadori, for example, because basically you cannot access those publishing giants if you are, a debutant. Like if you are a young author trying to emerge in the publishing history in Italy, you usually find publication with an independent small publisher. If you want to publish with the big ones, you have to go through a literary agency. Like there's no other way, basically.
Yeah.
Or the director, but
I think it's almost mandatory when it comes to major publishing houses. You really have to have a literary agent. I think you couldn't even try to reach someone by yourself when it comes to major publishing houses. So you need that kind of representative of your own artistry, of your own pieces of books and so on through a literary agent, and then you can maybe hope you will be published, but it's not certain. It's not certain at all.
There's no guarantee either way.
No, not at all.
Another question, it's about the book in Italian, how it is produced actually and how it is distributed, because the system is, as we said, different between countries. And in Italy, that's how to say that, that's like a giant
We are going to paint such a very dark picture of Italian publishing situation right now.
that's a bit it,
But it's true. It's true.
Yeah,
I mean, what you're saying is absolutely true.
So,
we have a huge monopoly issue.
Yeah. With bookshops that are property of giants of publishing.
Yeah, basically.
So I was just asking, as an independent publisher, how do you do? How are you well distributed, etc. So.
That's a really difficult question, because as Sephira was saying, in Italy we have a really huge monopoly problem. So basically, the publishing giants own the distribution tools. Of course, the biggest ones, and also the bookshops. So as a small independent publisher, you can maybe access the independent libraries, of course, the ones that want fantasy books, because not all of them want to sell fantasy books. And you can try to, enter the bookstores. I said it. The bookstores owned by the publishing giants, maybe by presenting the book, creating an event, presentation, but it's not certain. For example, we tried to organize this book presentation for one of our novels in one of these huge bookstores, and they actually told us they were not going to do it simply because the distribution system couldn't bring our books to them. They were just going to do it if a client asked for the book, so it was just for one book. And this is a huge problem because we are really well distributed in Italy, I would say. We care a lot about being in a lot of independent libraries, so we are working with a lot of distributors, books distributor. I don't know the English word. I'm sorry for them.
I think it's
but it's kind of difficult to emerge because the publishing giants basically don't want you to emerge. They want to sell their books. So it's basically impossible. And it's also impossible to, being noticed in big book fairs such as Turin, international book fairs, because either you pay a lot of money, or you don't get a huge space, or maybe you don't even, can afford to participate. So it's really complicated. I will not dive into details.
Thank you. So I have to choose my questions, so it's really hard for me. I wanted.
So we can extend. We usually do between 60 and 90 minutes for these talks. So
yeah, but I wanted to keep a quarter for the public question, and I have so many questions left, so I have to choose. So feel like in Italy, at least in small structures, there's like a particular interest about magazine. I saw Susuri on the Lumien site and the newsletter. There's also Chimera from Novilunio. That's not a publisher, and there's others, but that's not fantasy. I saw horror magazine, and all of them are like free or really cheap online magazine, and there's not that thing in France actually. And I was hoping if you can explain me how it works and if as a publisher and as authors, if you write in them actually.
Well, as a publisher, I can just say that Sussurri, our magazine, was created simply because we wanted to give some space to authors. It's, as you said, a free magazine. We offer it online so everybody can read it, and we do all the work. We select the short stories. We pay the illustrator for the cover. So we do everything. I would not say for charity, but for a good cause, because we want to give, as I said, the authors and writers a space to be noticed. And I'm really happy. I've heard that some of the writers published in Sussurri later published with some publishing houses or had the courage to go into self-publishing. So kind of a, launching platform. It could be great to, I don't know, even create a curriculum for a writer. I don't know the reasons behind this choice for other publishing houses because, of course, as I said, we do it for a good cause. I don't know if them do it if they do it for like publicity, marketing, or anything like that. I can say that I think, and maybe you guys can correct me, but Italian fantasy authors usually love writing short stories because we receive basically every day a request to do you accept anthologies? Do you accept short stories collections? And no, we at the moment, at least we don't publish them, but it's there's a huge request for this, so maybe they want to respond to this request.
Yeah, I think that's actually true. We really love short stories. I don't know why it's this kind of huge love for short stories. I think it's because we can convey a message in a short amount of words, and I think it's something that Italian authors really like to do. They like to just even show what they can do with their writing in a small amount, in a limit of words, and so on. So as well, I think I started with short stories as well on Tumblr and with fan fictions and so on. So I feel very attuned to the idea of writing short stories again, maybe participating in other Susuri editions and so on, because there are so many good magazines out there, especially in the Italian publishing system, but even in the independent system. I think about maybe there's another one, InDesign, maybe
Indie Zone. Mm-hmm.
InDesign, yeah, which is another one which is very interesting, a very interesting reality. So yeah, I think Italian authors are really loving that kind of direct communication with short stories as well. So I love the fact that publishing houses like Lumien really tend to motivate us authors to write short stories as well, because sometimes they can be very, very meaningful as well, even if they are shorter than novels, and they can convey so many great ideas that can also be actually expanded. I've also seen cases in which short stories have led to entire novels or even trilogies or series. So it's a phenomenon that really works in Italy.
I would just like to add that in general, there is a bit of a resurgence of the short fiction in general. So that comes also not just from short stories, but also from, let's say, short-sized novels like novelettes, for example. There are several publishing houses now publishing those, which is quite novel in our landscape, because it's usually something which was thought of as from the, let's say, previous century. So currently fantasy is more connected to very long books. So this is a bit of a difference in that sense. But I think that the main reason why so many authors go into short stories before starting their careers or on the side with respect to their normal writing is because their short stories can act as both a gym. So for trying out new ideas or maybe learning about new styles. So if you want to kind of discover what you can do or just try something which you would not really go into with a bigger maybe theme or structured story, then you kind of give it a try, give it a taste in that sense. But it's also a great way for showcasing your talent, since, as we said before, it's so hard to emerge as a kind of good author in the midst of very many new voices. It's good for building up your curriculum, especially if you go with some magazines with respect to others. It can act kind of very well and be nice to see in your curriculum. So apart from those magazines which were already cited, I think another good example would be Specularia, which is also a very good magazine, and it's an independent one, so it's not related to a specific publishing company, and that works only on speculative fiction. So it takes a broader overview on all things fantastic, and it can host some very good writers as well. So some already published authors together with some new authors in the beginning of a career. So it's a nice mix.
Thank you. So, a theme I wanted to talk about, and that's important, and we talked a little about before that, as you say in the interview, but also in Anatomia del Fantasy, ma non ho letto... Ah, no! Ho cambiato in italiano. So, as you said in Anatomia del Fantasy, and yeah, there is an evolution of the Italian fantasy scene, also about inclusivity and feminism topics and queer topics. What are your thoughts about it, and what are the evolution inside the books and the storytelling, etc.?
Thank you so much for this question. As you said, we are seeing deeper topics coming into play into fantasy Italian fiction. As Lexie was also saying, there's new authors, especially from, let's say, a younger generation, bringing up their own stories and their more like performative identities into play in this sort of stories, which end up being deeper in the sense of delving into queerness, whatever migration identities, nomadic identities. As I said before, the geographic position of Italy in the Mediterranean Sea somehow makes it necessary for us to think about topics such as migration and climate change. And I am very happy to admit and to state that finally these topics are actually entering into our fantasy as well, as a way of both understanding them and kind of also shedding lights onto them, and possibly finding new imaginative solutions for coexistence and for, like, say, future endeavors. In that sense, I would like to make an example, which is Sheridan, from Melania Muscas, which is a very beautiful book. It's from historical fantasy, set in the Iron Age in Sardinia. And it's all about migrations. So it's all about people coming into contact with each other and all the conflict which arise just from the fact that people are different. And there are so many views in that. And I think that's just a very good example of what fantasy can do. And maybe another example, which is from a totally different genre, would be Megalo from Enzo De Simone, which is published by Lumien. And in that, apart from having a very nice romantic story and a story about freedom, because it's about gladiators, so of course you can expect almost like a traditional, very Roman, very Italian stories. But I think that's the biggest strength of that book, and that's obviously my opinion, but I think it's something worth mentioning, is that there is very deep delve into climate change because it's an alternate history in which extraction of crude oil has completely devastated the south of Italy. And that's actually something which we have to think about. And so far, it's only been kind of depicted in sci-fi, climate fiction, and in general, those sort of topics used to be mostly represented in sci-fi. So it's very nice to finally see them in fantasy as well. Both the depiction, as I said, of climate fiction or migration, so bigger issues, but also identity and trauma. For example, trauma dealing. My own Creature dell'Assenza is all about loss. So what remains when you have to say goodbye to the people you love. So I think that those themes and those messages are becoming more and more important. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, it is. And if I can add to it, actually, that's the same thing I'd actually try to do with Arete la Rinascita, because I talk about identity and non-binary identities. And I think I had that need of talking about it because I couldn't find, especially in Italy, stories that would actually talk about different identities that went beyond the binary. So with Aeneas' journey, which is the main the protagonist of my book, I try to not only talk about my own experience as a non-binary person, but also try to create a new hero, in a sense, a hero that could be also representative of a category which is not very explored in Italian fantasy. But I'm happy to say that now I'm seeing more and more stories that delve into identity in every kind of cultural differences, and I feel like there's a larger variety of stories that talk about that. So with Arete, I started my own journey of an author who wants to talk about queer stuff, in a sense. But I also love the fact that maybe through publishing houses like Mosca Bianca Edizioni, even Lumien talks about it, and other publishing houses that really want to talk about the problems of our own environment, or even gender identity, cultural identity, war as well. I've seen many books talking about war and genocide as well. So there's a shift in Italian fantasy as well. And I think it's the most important part of it, because that's, as a reader, I think it's what I want to read as well. So that's why I really enjoy the fact that the Italian publishing system is changing a lot.
Yeah, and I would say writers are also changing a lot. Maybe they are more conscious and they want to include important themes in their works, because in the how can I say, in the template we have for evaluating manuscripts, there is a question we put that says, why should we publish your book? And every time writers write something like this. So because I care about this topic, because I included in a fantasy setting something that is so important to me and even the world. And I think that it's really important. And I always love reading those sentences because it means the writer actually put their heart into the work, and it's really really amazing. And we are looking for it actually. So as a publisher, I mean.
Okay, thank you for the answers. Actually, so I have two commentary from the public from YouTube. We have Blame Blast, which has wrote the two commentary. So I just lost it. That's okay. I wonder if there are other interesting differences in Italian fantasy concerning themes.
Concerning
Themes.
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 Well, I think that we kind of answered this in the sense that possibly we are giving a lot of interest and a lot of space right now on, for example, migration. And yes, I think that would be mostly what differs with respect to other countries. So the sort of focus right now would be that one. Both climate, migration, and in general, people moving from one place to another and the conflict which might arise from that. Because I think that the other themes which we have cited are not specific to Italy. Not that this one is, it's just the way probably we are kind of focusing on it, which is a bit different.
And maybe even the difference between North and South, in a sense, can be explored by stories, by Italian stories. So there's a huge difference from our perspective about Italian, Southern Italians and Northern Italians. So this can be also explored by so many good books. I actually had one book in mind, but as soon as I remember the title, I will say to you. But yeah, it's another aspect that can be explored by Italian fantasy as well. Yeah.
Yes, and I would maybe add the challenging of traditional gender roles because a lot of Italian writers are actually, digging into that topic. Mainly female writers, I would say, or at least people who feel there's need to change something. So, I mean, I found a lot of books. Of course, I cannot name one of those, one of them right now, but I found that quite a lot in these last few years. So, yeah, I think that's a huge theme for Italian fantasy.
Yeah, I think it comes as part of understanding that we are a very strongly patriarchal society still, and we are trying to kind of get free of that. But it's very, very hard because it's so engraved into our past. So it's definitely something which, as Giulia said, is coming into stories, and it's shaping our identities in different ways.
Thank you. And so the second commentary was, if there's time later, I'd like to bring Stefano Beni to the discussion as another example of a semi-famous Italian writer who has written in fantasy, magical realism, and science fiction. Do you have anything to say about it? About him?
In Italy, we don't consider Stefano Benni as an Italian fantasy writer for the reason we said before. He's a pure literature guy, and so he also probably doesn't want to be depicted as a fantasy author, because this goes both ways. So due to this stigma, even authors who actually use traditional ways and themes and methods and just write, for example, magic realism or downright fantasy, they don't want to be called fantasy writers, because if they do, they will just not sell. So even though we know that he is fantasy writer, because obviously he makes good use of irony, but always in the context of imagination. And so per se, it would be fantasy. But yes, it's very hard to kind of push through this glass roof and then emerge as fantasy and actually kind of what can I say? Just taking charge and appropriate ourselves with this way.
Okay, thanks. So, Sephira, Giulia, are you free for like overtakes 5 or 10 minutes?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, just on this very subject about Benny not wanting to be associated with fantasy. It's Davide from IKEA wanted to ask if you think it is because of a publishing house or the very collections that he's published in. It's a requirement for them not to be associated.
But I think that he also just doesn't even know himself. So there is no education on fantasy in our schools, or there is no space for this sort of discussion to happen. And we are still a bit close into our ghetto. So the fantastic is just sitting on one side, and then the guys writing literature, they're sitting at the big table with the adults, whereas we are still with the children. So it's very hard for them to take us seriously. And if you want to be taken seriously, you don't say, I write fantasy. So obviously he has absolutely no reason to do so. And I understand it. I mean, from a pragmatic point of view, it's totally clear.
Okay.
And if I can speak about my own experience as a teacher in schools, that's the same issue, because even in schools, fantasy is not dealt as well as other genres. So it's like fantasy is kind of a niche in which we don't go that far. We just avoid fantasy altogether, because it's also like it's almost like it's just for fun, just for entertainment. So it can't be a subject to teach, and students are actually very open to it, are very open to fantasy. And if you think about the fact that we study the Odyssey, the Iliad, I think the most ancient fantasy books, not maybe the most ancient, but we have so many fantasy examples, even in our own school programs, but they're not acknowledged as fantasy at all. It's like we just avoid the connection between classical literature and fantasy. And that's the issue, because it starts from school.
I don't know what to add to this topic, because I totally agree. It's a huge problem, and I think there's not much to do when it comes to the public school system, actually, because it has to come from above. But when it comes to accepting yourself as a fantasy writer, as Sephira said, in a pragmatical way, I totally understand him. And I also think it's because usually writers are greatly considered, are highly valued in Italy. In the moment you say you write fantasy, people are like, okay,
You're done.
It's a disaster.
I don't care anymore. It happened. I saw it in so many book fairs, at so many events. As soon as I told the person I was talking to, like, I publish books, incredible. I publish fantasy. They don't care anymore.
Okay.
So I think we can do a little moment of publicity for all of you. You choose who begins, actually.
Sephira, if you want to start, or
Oh
Giulia.
gosh, I'm just so bad at promoting myself. I will just say,
I'm the worst promoter.
I don't know, just kind of like buy my books. That's it, really.
What is there? Do you guys have any actuality you want to have the spotlight on? Do you have any? No, I don't know. Something you're going to do or are doing right now, and you want people to know about it?
Okay, well, I can say that I have 2 more books coming up, but next year. They will be novelettes, both of them. So hopefully I will be able to tell you more about it if we talk again next year on a similar occasion. That would be very welcome. But right now I think that I would like to focus on Anatomia del Fantasy because we are making a 2.0 version, so an updated version, which is also coming soon. Where we have increased the bibliography because, again, like 200 entries was not enough. It's as you can see, it's actually a pretty massive book. So it's really the first of its type in Italy, and it took us 10 years to write it. It's been a major challenge, but
An incredible work.
Thank you.
Yeah, really, congratulations for this one.
Yeah, we think that it's something which was really needed in Italy because of everything we said today. So both to kind of put the basics for a discussion on fantasy and also to kind of try to pinpoint where we are going right now. So kind of a picture of the current situation as well as
actually
we need basics.
We need this type of book in France too. We don't have it.
Well, if someone wants to translate it, I would not say no.
Okay, I think I'll go next. Well, I published Arete la Rinascita with Pave Edizioni, and I'm actually working on the second book of the series. And at the end of this year, another book which is actually set in the world of Arete is going to come out. So it's actually pretty soon. And I'm also currently working on other stories for video games and a collection of an anthology of stories. So I'm trying to try new things. Yeah, I want to try new things. I want to just delve into other ways of telling stories. And I think that's my journey up until now. So that's
Can I add something, Lexie, because you wrote poetry in English, and if people want to read something, if they don't speak Italian, and they can read also your poetry.
Oh yeah, of course. I've written a collection of poetry about my own identity, about my journey through mental health disorders, and it's called Flesh and Flowers, and it's self-published. And actually, all the funds I've received from the selling of this collection of poems went to Palestine, went to an association which actually helps women here in Italy. It's called Luce e Siesta, il collettivo Luce e Siesta in Rome, and another association that works with mental health. It helps with mental health in Italy. So yeah, that's what I've done up until now with self-publishing. So I'm very proud of it.
That's great.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I actually don't know what to talk about in particular, but I can tell you that the sequel of our steampunk novel, Il Depositario dell'Eco by Carlotta Martello, is actually coming around here in September, but I cannot tell you the precise date because we are going to announce it on Instagram. And at the moment, I'm sorry to tell you that we don't have any books translated in English, but we are working on it. So please stay tuned. And end of the publicity part.
Going to show it. That would be that would be there.
That one, Megalo, on the right, I think, for the public.
Right.
Yeah, on the right is the one Sephira mentioned before, with the themes like environmentalism and also colonialism in a second part. And then Il Depositario dell'Eco, the one I mentioned, is a steampunk adventure novel, such as the 19th century novels, but with a contemporary twist. And it actually is not fantasy, it's science fiction, but I cannot tell you anything more.
Absolutely.
So
Sorry, I'm missing this, but Flesh and Flowers by Lexie, and I missed. Sorry for not showing the cover earlier, but here it is.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Very beautiful. It would not be, and just for the teasing, because okay, let's be honest, we do have a small project with Sephira.
So we're saying it.
Yeah, but we're not. We can say we have one, and we won't give the details yet.
After
Let's
the
just say that.
conference, after the meeting, when we close the live, you can say.
Okay.
So,
My mouth is.
Sephira, you wanted to talk about Dracones.
Yes, maybe just a couple words, because we have been talking about Italian fantasy for an hour and a half. So if anyone is interested, you can actually have the possibility to browse our, let's say, showcase into the website associazionedracones.com, I think. We will maybe write it in the comment afterwards, because we are kind of putting together all the books from our associates. So all people who write Italian fantasy, hopefully in the future, will be uploading their books onto our website. And our idea is obviously to make the site accessible to people from abroad as well. So that's why we translated it in English. So if you want to read some good or very good Italian fantasy, that's definitely a good place to start.
Thank you all. Well,
Thank you.
Can I add some publicity about Chimera?
Please do.
Chimera is a little media. We're 3 on it. Actually, it's a bit off because 2 of us were finishing our master degree with the master thesis, and that's a nightmare. So we were off. We're not dead. We will come back. I don't have a date at the moment, but you can show our previous interview. There's one with Romain, actually, about one of his books, so go on. That's in French, I'm sorry. But there's one with River Solomon that's in English, and there will be others. I can't say the name because I don't have any dates, but I'm sorry.
Okay, and I'm putting the Facebook channel link in the chat. Okay.
So, thank you.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for
Thank you so
hosting
much.
this beautiful event. It was really a pleasure to meet all of you and speak about, of course, our favorite genre.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Everyone.
Thank
Especially
you.
thank you, Aliya, because you took time from your very busy schedule with a master degree coming up. So
Thank you.
thanks a lot,
Thank
really.
you.
We appreciate it.
Good luck.
That's
Congratulations.
interesting. Thank you.
And also thank you for everyone who actually stayed and watched this till the end.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. It means a lot to us. Thank you.
Yes.
It's true. Thank you so much.
And thank you, everyone in the future that will go and watch the video.
Yeah, so you can all watch the replay. It's going to be on YouTube and for a small period of time on Twitch. We're going to close this live, just saying that next week we'll have another 3 conferences. They will be on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, just like this week. And we'll talk first about international collaborations. That we'll talk with L'Asiatech, French publisher, and Capsule Magazine, German publisher, who realized a very nice collaboration recently about sci-fi between China, Germany, and France. We'll talk about French science fiction and fantasy publishing with French editors this time, still be in English, but also with with authors like Céline Edgar and Giulia Padovan. So this will be very fun. And at the end, and next Thursday, we'll have a talk about Chinese online science fiction and fantasy literatures with Gwenaëlle Gaffric, who is the translator of the 3 Body Problems in France.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll have a busy next week. We hope we'll see you there. Thank you again, Aliya, for the unparalleled hosting of this conference. Thank you, Sephira, Giulia, and Lexie. It was really a pleasure having you and an honor having
Thank you.
And we really hope we get to exchange further with everyone's different projects. It was really cool for us. And so the conferences will still be at 7 p.m. Every time. See you there and have a good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye.